We're talking today with Bob Elliott of Holland, Michigan. This interview was doing double duty as both a regular oral history interview for the GVSU Veterans History Project. We are also using it in our documentary project, focusing on the experiences of Marine Corps veterans who served in Vietnam. Interviewers today are James Smither and Heather Martin of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Bob, do you want to begin with some background on yourself? To begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Hart, Michigan in November 22nd, 1948. We remained up north there in Hart until I was in the third grade, halfway through. We moved then from there to Muskegon, and I stayed in Muskegon until 1966.
Did you graduate from high school?
No. Things were a little troublesome, mostly by my causing. So at 17, I had my folks sign a waiver for me to enter service, and I went into the Marine Corps.
All right. Before we go on with that, what did your family do for a living when you were growing up?
My grandparents raised me. As it turned out, she was fairly sickly, and my grandfather was a manufacturing person, and I worked when I wasn't at school, summer. And so we were just a lower middle class.
So you say manufacturing, like a grandfather did factory work.
Factory
he
work,
wasn't running a factory.
No.
Anything like that. Okay. And basically you decided at age 17 that the Marine Corps was a better way to go than staying in school.
Believe it or not, even though things were bad, I did a little mental calculations, even though as a teenager you're not thinking too bright. But I knew that Vietnam was going on. I was keeping track of I was reading the papers and watching the news. But I also knew that I wanted to go into service, period.
Right. So why did you choose the Marine Corps?
I started looking at the percentages of wounded, the percentages of KIAs, and I had a better chance of survival going into the Marine Corps. That was,
As opposed to the Air Force or the Navy?
believe it or not, the Air Force, the enemy knew where they were at all times because they were in one place. I didn't want something to happen with me out in the water, and I had to tread water for who knows how long. And chose the Marine Corps.
All right. Okay. So when did you actually enlist?
I actually enlisted in March of '66, and they had a 3-month delay, and so in July I actually went in.
Okay. And at what point did you get a physical?
As soon as I enlisted in March.
Okay. And where did they do that?
Oh, that was in Detroit, at Fort Custer.
Well, Fort Wayne is in Detroit. Fort Custer is Battle Creek, but
Fort Wayne.
Fort Wayne, yeah. Detroit's
Fort
the
Wayne.
usual place to go, yeah.
Well, sorry.
When you were doing the physical, was everybody there going into the Marines, or do you think it was a bunch of people?
No, it was everything. Everyone that was, I don't know if there was Air Force there. I know for sure there was Army and Navy also there. They had places set up for people to do the tests, the mental test. And they had doctors and they had everything all set right there. And a great percentage were leaving from there. Once they passed their physical, they were going to the airport.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, do you know if a lot of those guys were draftees at that point, or couldn't you tell?
I didn't see too many draftees in that early. It was still quite early in the war.
Yeah, those are really
as
big
far
draft.
as for troop involvement.
Yeah. The really big draft was later in '66, I think. That was the first really big wave of them. So you might have missed that. But anyway, okay. So you go, you have the physical. Was the physical fairly thorough, or was it pretty cursory?
Well, no, it was thorough. It was very thorough. A lot of people when they went, they had sports problems, knees, shoulders, backs, and they had to check those. They wanted, we had to bring backgrounds from doctors at home throughout your, most of your childhood to make sure that, you were caught up on your immunizations and, you weren't carrying any weird diseases or something.
Right. So at this point, they really are making sure that you're fit to go in, rather than being desperate and taking everybody.
Correct. They weren't looking for just a pulse in your trigger finger. They were making sure you were mentally stable and physically stable.
Right. And that was the way they preferred to do it, at least at that point. Okay. So then you got to go home. Did you finish out the school year, or had you already left high school by then?
At that point, I was still going to school. Somewhere within a month after having the physical, I left school. And I actually got a job, and I worked right up until time to leave.
Okay. So when did you go out to start boot camp?
July, it was 22nd, I believe, 21st. Was when I got to San Diego.
Okay. And how did they get you out to San Diego?
Well, we flew from Detroit, and we had a change of flight in LA, which was intriguing, but not as intriguing as when we landed in San Diego. There was older ladies and people, gentlemen in suits, and here comes a couple of DIs just cursing and hollering and lining us up and sending us outside, and people stepping back like, wow, what are these people doing to these guys? And they took us outside and lined us up on the road. People that are in the Navy already are coming by, and they're giving us their best. And yeah, it was really exciting. I'm thinking, boy, I really wanted to volunteer for this.
Did you have any idea that this was the treatment you were going to get?
Oh no, and that was calm. They got a bus and they loaded us up on a bus. We got into MCRD, and then a full-fledged DI came in, and man, he got us off that bus, and we hit them yellow footprints. And at that point, we were told that the Marine Corps was our mother, our brother, our sister, our girlfriend, our everything in the world to us, and we were nothing. And for the next 8 weeks, you're mine.
Okay. Now, from the yellow footprints, what kind of processing did you get? Well, first of all, I guess, when did you what time of day did you arrive at the depot, and then what happens to you in that first 24 hours?
They get you there like about 4 o'clock, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then, of course, you have to go get, and everything's all in a line, so it all takes time. And you have to get a haircut, and you have to take all your civilian clothes and everything you bring with you and put it in a box, send it home. Then you have to go get fitted for fatigues, boots, and quick enough to give you just enough nourishment that you'll survive. Somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3 o'clock in the morning, you get to go to bed. And about 4:30 in the morning, they come in and start tipping over beds and waking you up and getting you outside. And it doesn't take long that you learn that, 40-some guys won't fit through the door at once, and you're going to have to learn how to single file through the door. But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Can you explain what MCRD stands for?
Marine Corps Recruit Depot,
Okay, and then the DIs are?
drill instructors.
Okay, and then what's the difference between fatigues and a different uniform? Or what type
Fatigues
of
are
uniform?
work uniform. They're the
Okay.
olive drab green.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's differentiated from either the dress blues on the one hand
Or dress
jungle.
greens.
Yeah.
Or tropics.
Yeah. Okay, those kinds of things. Okay. Now, what did the actual boot camp program consist of? What were they teaching you to do?
At first, it's physical. Making sure that you get into the physical condition they want you in. Every morning before anything happens, you quick use the restroom. I mean, you have just a short period of time and get back in line and you run. And you do that for at least 3 to 5 miles. And you come back and you can get a quick splash of water, and you have to shave so that you look presentable when you go to the chow hall, and then you may have breakfast. And when you come back to the barracks from breakfast, you usually have calisthenics to wear off the fat from the food that you ate. And that's, by then it's ready for another run before lunch, and well, there's calisthenics to wear off the fat from what you had for lunch, and
Right.
but after a couple of weeks you start going to classes. There's a lot of history of the service that you're in, which is our branch was Marine Corps, and so you have a myriad of classes that you will have to take, initiating you to weapons, parts of weapons, how to take them apart, put them together. How to present yourself as a service person. You have to know the military code of conduct. There's
Okay.
a lot.
Okay. Now, how do they work in sort of the discipline part and the obeying orders part? What's going on there?
That came through the military code of conduct, and I mean, you're the only time you call an NCO in the Marine Corps serves during boot camp. And when you addressed a drill instructor, it started with sir and ended with sir.
Would you also could you call them drill instructor or sergeant if they were a sergeant, or was it just sir at that point?
I don't think that you, sir, may I, I don't know, there was too many times where I actually used the drill instructor as a drill instructor or his rank. I'm trying to think on that one, and mostly I'm thinking sir.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And if you if you went too far beyond that, you were, exercise.
Now, what kinds of things did they do to kind of enforce discipline and get you conditioned to follow orders?
At least once a day, they would march us past correctional custody platoon. It was all fenced in, people that were in jail. They'd stop us long enough to watch these guys with sledgehammers breaking up big pieces of concrete at cadence. Raise, swing, raise, swing. And they'd have a few other groups out there doing other nasty things. They'd have big pieces of pipe with concrete on each end, and they'd be lifting them over there. They'd be doing exercise with them. And they'd have these great big guards yelling and screaming and pushing these guys around, and you think, that's not a place I want to be. And then when they got you back, they'd get right in your face. And, you want to hit me, don't you, girl? Come on, go ahead. You can hit me. No problem. We know where you'll wind up.
How did they handle minor infractions? Because I'm assuming they wouldn't put you in the correctional for that.
We had a person that didn't pass rifle inspection. So he had to go out and dig a grave for his rifle. And then he had to go out and unbury it. Then he had to have it cleaned. Then he had to pass an inspection. And we all had to make sure that the leather, all leather, was spit shine to a mirror finish. And every once in a while, if a person did a little bit of something that the drill instructor didn't like, he could just scuff your boot. What are you doing with that scuffed? That's not shined properly. And then there it would begin. Huh. And every single person, I don't care how good they were, everybody had, at one time, something wrong. There was no favoritism. Everybody was subject to a little bit of discipline.
Did you understand at the time why they were doing this?
I guess right at first, no, but then you start to understand that if you don't start working as a team, if you don't start working together, this person is having a little bit of a problem, and that's why he's having these infractions, so someone needs to help him. You start finding that out really quick, and that was basically that was what they were trying to get through to you.
Okay. Now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to life in the Marine Corps?
Actually, once you make it through boot camp, and it was just because they got me so angry that I was going to do it no matter what. But once you make it through boot camp, I mean, it really wasn't that bad. Everybody had a job to do, but when you were in civilian life, you had a job to do. It might not be the same job, but everybody has a job to do, and you have to take care of yourself. And
okay. Now, how long did the boot camp part last?
For me, it was an extra 2 weeks. I went in overweight, and I had to go to physical conditioning platoon.
Okay. What did they do?
Physical conditioning, diet. And it worked. You know, I went back and I picked up in a platoon that had 6 weeks to go, and I was in for 4 weeks at that time, and I made it through it.
All right.
I was physical, and
Now, were there people who couldn't cut it or washed out?
at times we had people that, for one reason or another, either I didn't see too many people that couldn't make it in my platoon. We we all got together and helped people too much that the only person we had that we knew didn't make it was afraid to go to sick bay, and he passed away with 106 fever.
Oh.
And that was the one time that the drill instructor brought us in as a group and actually talked to us like we were civilians and told us that if you're sick, you need to go to the doctor, and let's not play games on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he hollered and screamed as soon as that was done, go out and do exercise.
Right. Okay. So what did you do after boot camp? What's the next step?
We went up to Camp Pendleton, and we had had infantry training. It's usually 4 weeks. Right at the end of 2 weeks, our staff sergeant came in and started calling people's names. Mine was one. He said, because of your MOS, you need not be here for the next 2 weeks. Because your MOSs, you're not going to be infantry.
At what point did you have an MOS assigned to you?
About a week left in boot camp.
Okay. And do you have any idea how they make those decisions or assignments?
I think, and I'm not sure, but I think some of it has to do with your test scores from induction. And then a lot of it has to do with the critical need. And then it's just a lottery.
Okay.
Because had I gotten what I wanted, not knowing until after I got in the service and after I had gotten to Vietnam, I may not have made it back because I wanted to be a explosive ordnance disposal. I thought, oh, that's really cool when I'm on the outside. And when I got in the service, I thought, that's not too cool.
Okay. So that would have been dealing with mines and booby traps and that kind of thing?
Oh, yeah.
What is an MOS?
Each job in the service is assigned a number. And that number is called an MOS. I can't remember.
Military occupational
Yeah,
specialty.
military occupational.
Okay.
And mine was 2531, which was voice radio communication.
Okay. All right. So you spend the 2 weeks. Now, the 2 weeks at Camp Pendleton, when you're with everybody else, what were you actually doing in those 2 weeks?
That was all weapons. Machine gun, bazooka. Well, no, it wasn't all that either. We had a infiltration course, which was fun. And they showed us how to use hand grenades. But when all that was finished, then people went their separate ways.
Okay. So the rest of them might have gone off for longer hikes or exercises and things.
Well, the rest that were the 0311s, which is infantry, stayed for the last 2 weeks of infantry training. And everyone else went to their assigned schools.
Okay. So where did you go for radio school?
Just to another camp in Pendleton. And they had it set up there.
Okay. So what were they teaching you and how long were you there?
Was there 4 weeks. You know, first we were familiarized with the radio that they were using then. And then it was phonetic alphabet. While we were there, excuse me, they run a background check, and we had to have a secret clearance. And then was how to put that into use.
So did you learn a lot of the basic electronics of how a radio works or that kind of thing?
No, we had people that were assigned the repair part. And so all you had to do was be able to change battery and then change frequency. But we had to do, you know, we had to learn how to talk on it. And believe it or not, that sounds kind of simple, but it's really not. It's the same as having these mics here. If they're too close, you're going to get a mushy sound, and you're not going to be able to understand. And that's where, you know, get the mic away from your mouth. And enunciate. And
now when this is voice transmissions, you're just talking into the mic and you're talking to
and
people.
a handheld mic. And
Yeah. Now, was there an expectation that the enemy would be listening in to what you were saying, and were there any things you learned in terms of how to make it harder for them to figure out what you were saying?
we could, when we were out in the field, before we actually turned off, when we signed off, we would keep the mic held and listen for a click on the other end. We could also tell if they had honed in on either end. And of course then something would happen. Small arms, mortars, rockets, and you'd change the frequency. And the reason we had to have the secret clearance is we had to carry a code book. And if we knew we were being listened, we would send a message in code, and then communications was done until a chopper or whoever would come out and give you a new code book, and then you would burn the old one.
All right. Now, what kind of radio? Did you only use one type of radio in the radio school, or did they show you different kinds?
In radio school, they showed us quite a few kinds. Prick 25, which was the one we would carry on our back on a pack, and a Mark 84, which was on the back of a Jeep, which was quite big. A PRC 45, which was a little bit bigger than the 25, but the antenna was 3 inches in diameter and 2 foot high. And that was used for ground-to-air communication.
And did you learn procedures for communicating with different kinds of support units or forces?
During radio school, we didn't, right after boot camp, we didn't learn a lot of that. Eventually I did, but not then.
Okay. Now, when you finished the radio school, what did you do next?
Well, went home on leave. When I came back, we went to a staging barracks, and we were waiting for enough people to fill a charter plane to go to Hawaii, and all branches that were filling in. And I went up to the Marine Corps Air Station in Kaneohe.
Okay. And what unit did you join at that point?
1st Battalion, 27th Marines.
Okay. And what was your assignment then with the 1st Battalion, 27th Marines?
The first, I only had 2, but the first one was with radio company itself. Well, actually, radio platoon. It's not a whole company. And that's where we started learning more about communication with other units, how to send situation reports, how to call in for supply, and how to call in medevacs, and you know, those type of things. After about 5 months, they needed a replacement in the mortar platoon because one of their radio operators had gotten sent to Vietnam. And I was elected.
All right.
Which was fine. I knew people over there anyway, so it was good. And that's where I started learning forward operating procedures, calling in artillery. When I started, I had to learn how to call in mortars because that was my job.
Mm-hmm.
And we branched out. They wanted us to be able to know more than just mortars. If we're the only one that's available to use a radio, you need to know as much as you can about what to do with it. And we had extensive classes on artillery. Airstrikes was a big one. We spent a lot of time on that. You had to be able to get planes in and out, maybe so they didn't hit each other, maybe so they didn't fly into sides of mountains or trees, or was it, you know, depending on how low they came down, they had to have access out. Well, those F4s are a lot like the ones today. They only have a small window, and once they start going up, about all they can see is the nose of the plane. And so they count on you for giving them an azimuth out of there. So we did a lot of that, and that's
Okay. So how long did you spend in Hawaii?
a little over a year.
All right. Now, what was daily life like there?
Average 85 degrees, sunny. I mean, we had a job to do, but man, it That was the greatest assignment that you could ever get.
So what kind of hours did you keep?
Well, we get up about 6:30, and we were done around 4:30, unless you had, a specific assignment or a watch. That didn't happen all the time.
Okay.
Or you might be out training. You might be out in the field, training for a week, but you didn't do that all the time either.
So what would you do in your time off?
Go surfing. Yeah, on the beach.
How close were you to Honolulu? Or
No, it was about. It was a 40-minute drive. Because you had to come down through the mountains, and then you hit the big traffic jams. But yeah.
all right. Now, did you begin to think that maybe you were just going to spend your whole time in Hawaii, or did you know that sooner or later you were going to go to Vietnam?
Well, I think it was always in the back of your head that you had a great chance that you were going to go. They would post people that were wounded and people that were killed that were replacements to Vietnam from our unit. They had activated our unit almost a year before I got there. And they activated our unit originally to be a replacement unit. People would come, people would get trained, and they would leave there separately or in small groups as replacements to units in Vietnam. So it was always in the back of your head that you never knew when your name was going to get called to make a plane trip.
Okay. Now, during that year when you're with the unit, did a lot of the guys you were working with go to Vietnam, or just a few of them?
Yeah, it was just a few, really. It's not a whole lot. It's kind of, it really, and that's what kind of seemed kind of weird. I had a friend from Muskegon come home. He was wounded, but he was wounded too bad to stay in the service. And we had, and here's this whole list of people that had been here that were gotten into, a little bit of fracas over there. And wow, here we are, we're still all here.
Okay.
Until the end of January of '68.
Okay. And so that, what happens at that point? What's the sequence that changes things for you?
They told us we were going on a training cruise. We were going to go to the Philippines and Japan, Taiwan, Australia. So as we're boarding the ship, we're sitting down in Pearl Harbor, and there's a whole group of us watching the cranes load the supplies. And there's crates of live ammunition being loaded. That don't seem right. Why are we really going to train with live ammunition? I guess that was a tell there. They didn't play poker too well.
Mm-hmm. All right. So then how did they get you to Vietnam?
Well, we were on board ship. We had just crossed the international date line, and they told us our plans had changed and that we were now going as a replacement unit to Vietnam. And so you could feel the ship speed just a little bit. Not a whole lot because it's pretty big, and it kind of changed course a little bit because we were heading toward the Philippines and that took over.
Okay. Now, did you have any idea at the time or later why that change happened, or if it was planned all along?
At the time, being out in the middle of the ocean, we weren't privy to a lot of information. We didn't have newspapers. We didn't have television. So we didn't find out until we got on shore exactly why we were there. But we were there to replace a whole battalion of the 1st Marines that had went up north into Hue from south of Danang for the Tet offensive. And that area was left kind of unsupported. And so they brought us in there to fill that gap.
All right. Now, did you stop anywhere before landing in Vietnam, or did you go straight to Vietnam?
We left Pearl Harbor and went straight to Vietnam.
Okay. And where did you land in Vietnam?
Just south of Da Nang. And we were supposed to dock in the harbor. All night long, none of us went to sleep. All night long, there's stuff happening on the shore. We're coming up the shoreline, and they stopped short and told us we were going to land in landing craft. And they put the nets down, and we're all scared. We're exchanging addresses and all that stuff, saying, well, hey, if I don't, make it, get a hold of my parents for me. But unbeknownst to us, sappers had came in underwater and had sunk a ship and plugged up the harbor in Da Nang, and that was the only way we were going to get ashore.
So did you think you were launching a beach invasion at that point?
Well, we didn't quite know if it was an invasion because they didn't give us any ammunition. They just, you're going down the nets and you're going in landing craft, but you had been watching stuff all night and you're really shaky.
All right. So how do they actually, what's the process involved in actually getting you into the landing craft and getting you ashore?
They put the nets down. Everybody, climbs down, fill up the landing craft, LSTs, take us to shore, and then they had trucks for us that took us over to our base camp.
Okay. Now, were the landing craft kind of the World War II type with the open top and a bunch of guys standing?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You get to shore, the front falls down.
Okay. Because you would said LST, but an LST is a much bigger thing with a big ship, but that wouldn't be what you had.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So you land there, they pick you up, okay. Then now that they load you in the trucks, what do you do next?
Well, we had to get acclimated to the climate before we did anything. So for the first couple of weeks, we just kind of hung out. They'd get us out in the heat, and not really hard, but calisthenics, but we'd exercise in the heat. But not for long periods of time at first. Just enough to make sure that you were really active in that heat. And then they had showers. Well, temperature.
Now, were you on a large base at this point, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And just stayed right there in Danang or in that area?
It was about 10 miles south.
Okay.
Bong Song 1.
Okay. All right. And was there much going on around there at that time? Much enemy activity?
It was pretty quiet. Really, it was pretty quiet in that actual area. The only thing we knew of that was going on was what we heard over Armed Forces radio, and which was nothing around us.
Was the
we were
fighting
pretty
still going
fortunate.
on in Hue at the time you landed?
Yeah, that went on for a little while after we landed.
All right. Now, the getting acclimated part, did they try to teach you anything about functioning in Vietnam, or either dealing with the enemy or with the civilians or anything like that? Or were you just kind of sitting around and just doing what they told you?
Well, we didn't, well, we had, yeah, there was a lot of sitting around doing what they told us, but we didn't really have a lot of people with us that had been there before. So, I mean, it was a lot of trying to find someone that you could talk to that had been there already, or that was there. And I was fortunate to find another communications person that, you know, was there, had been there, and you know, him and I had a really good conversation. But dealing with the people, they just tell you that, you know, they can't be trusted, leave them alone. I mean, it was just this broad communication about it, and that was...
Okay. So there's no real Vietnam training per se going on?
Nah, we didn't, no. They just told us, you know, you're going to have to use the, you know, you've been trained for a year. You're going to have to use that training. Really?
Okay. So after a couple of weeks, now do you start conducting operations, or what do you do?
Not operations. It started out, we just did like a 6 or 7 hour patrol. Leave out in the morning, come back before dark. It was another full week before we went out to an overnight. And it was just one overnight. Go out far enough that you wouldn't be able to come back. You had to stay where you were, form a perimeter, set up a defense. Everybody stand their watches, get up in the morning, and then, you know, make your way back. Yeah. But it was a slow process into it. At first, just to make sure you understood. And they didn't want you rushing into it. That was twofold. Don't rush into it. And next, you know you have the time. Learn what to do while you're out there. Learn to look for booby traps, tripwires. Learn to look for trails. Start learning this stuff. Because it won't be long, you'll have to use that information.
Okay. Now, at this point, was there not much contact with the enemy? You were just going out and coming back?
Maybe every other time there would be a little bit of contact. The biggest contact we had was one point man missed a tripwire, and what the enemy would do is, when it was like a small river, and where they would set that booby trap, they would be waiting. And as soon as he hit that, and that explosive went off, they opened up with small arms. As soon as they could, just banging and Well, we had to settle that down. We had to call in the medevacs, and we had to call in artillery to suppress the contact. Next time we went out, there was nothing.
Okay.
So it was sporadic.
Now you're there, your whole battalion has gone out there together. You're assigned as a radio man with the mortar platoon, which is part of kind of the headquarters and support company or whatever for the battalion. Now on these patrols and things they're doing, what size units were actually conducting those?
They started out like squads, which is, 10, 12 people. To a platoon, depending on how long you were going to be out and how much of an area they wanted you to cover. And we didn't do anything big until we started Allen Brook.
Okay. Now, your job, and so what were you doing out in the field? Because normally, do the mortars normally stay in a base camp, and what happened?
We had a section of mortars within range of where we were. Well, when we got hit there and that lead man hit that tripwire, we had mortars behind us that were within range. And we could use those, which we did. We had 3 radio operators out there, but because of the small arms that we took right away, mine was the only operational radio left. So I had to do everything. I had to do the situation reports, the artillery, the mortars, the medevacs, and we were a 2-person team. I was radio operator for a forward observer, and that forward observer was a forward observer for mortars, but he was also trained along with me to use the maps and lingo for artillery and air. So we could function no matter what the team leader that was with us or the company commander or whoever it was, whatever they needed, we could function.
Okay. Now, was your normal job with the unit to go out in the field with the men and report back, or would you sometimes stay in a perimeter or a base camp and take those messages coming in?
Yeah, I didn't stay in too much. When I did stay in, I had radio watches to take messages coming in. But I would say the vast majority of my job was for my FO and myself to be assigned to a team or a company or whatever size that was going out, and we were pretty much out. We were out with them. We'd come back for a while, but we'd rest, get clean clothes and resupply, and next thing you know, they'd be calling us to go back out with another team.
All right. So you have what are essentially these initial exercises that are not too big or long or extended, not too much contact. But then you actually get involved in a major operation. Your name was called Allen Brook. So what was that? When were you in it? Where was it?
Right around the first part of May, they loaded us all onto trucks. And they took us out to an area called Go Noi Island. Really wasn't an island, but in the wet season when it flooded, the water would come all the way around it. And that's why the Vietnamese called it Go Noi Island. They took us out there and they explained to us that our mission out there was to make contact. That the Vietnamese were planning a second Tet Offensive. Our job was to keep it from coming in to the city because they wanted no more house to house. It was too costly. Costly for the Vietnamese, costly for Americans, our lives, their lives. Keep it out in the fields. So we knew when they dropped us off, as soon as they told us they wanted us to go a certain direction to a certain coordinates, that there was a very high possibility from here to there, somewhere was going to be enemy forces. And all the time that we were out there, the forces we ran into were highly trained, highly skilled North Vietnamese regulars, not just farmers. And they actually were setting up for another Tet Offensive. And we were only a part of maybe 4 other units, maybe more, that were out there doing the same thing that we were doing.